The warning had been carved into the central pillar of the Galactic Council chambers for over 2 centuries. Every species that joined the galactic community saw those words during their initiation ceremony. The script glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, ensuring no one could ignore its message. Never drag humans into your wars. Ambassador Zector of the Vorthak Empire stared at those words now, his 4 eyes narrowing as he considered the proposal before him. The Vorthak had been locked in a brutal conflict with the Hegemony Alliance for 3 standard years. His people were dying by the millions, their outer colonies falling one by one to the relentless advance of hegemony forces. "The warning is clear," said Counselor Myrazeth, her crystalline voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. "Yet you stand here today asking us to make an exception." Zector's mandibles clicked nervously. The Etherian counselor was old, even by her species standards. She had been present when the warning was first inscribed, when the last species foolish enough to involve humans in their conflict had begged for mercy that came too late. "Honorable Counselor," Zector began, his translator struggling to convey the desperation in his voice. "The situation has changed. The hegemony grows stronger each day. They've developed new weapons, conquered systems we thought impregnable. If we don't act soon, they'll dominate half the galaxy." Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species watched the exchange with varying degrees of interest and concern. The Mantari delegation whispered among themselves, their feathered crests rustling with agitation. The silicon-based Kranari remained motionless, but their optical sensors glowed brighter than usual, indicating heightened attention. "The situation," Myrazeth replied, her form shimmering slightly as emotions played across her energy-based physiology, "has not changed enough to warrant ignoring centuries of wisdom. The humans were quarantined to their section of the galaxy for good reason." Zector's primary arms gestured emphatically, while his secondary pair remained clasped behind his back in a gesture of formal supplication. "With respect, Counselor, the quarantine was established after the War of 3 Suns when humans were less disciplined. They've had time to mature, to understand the complexities of galactic politics." A sound rippled through the chamber that might have been laughter, though it came from species that had no concept of humor as humans understood it. Even the ever-serious Kranari delegation emitted what could only be described as a dismissive harmonic frequency. "Maturity?" This came from Representative Kalvak of the Hegemony Alliance, his serpentine form uncoiling from his delegation's seating area. "You speak of human maturity as if it were a proven fact rather than desperate wishful thinking." Zector's enemy had chosen to attend this session personally, a calculated show of confidence that made the Vorthak ambassador's stomach acids churn with anxiety. Kalvak was known for his cunning, his ability to turn any situation to the hegemony's advantage. "The humans remain exactly what they have always been," Kalvak continued, his forked tongue tasting the air as he spoke. "Unpredictable, violent, utterly without regard for the established order of things. The quarantine protects us as much as it protects them." "That's not true," Zector protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "They've honored the quarantine for 200 years. They've made no aggressive moves, started no conflicts with neighboring systems." "Because," Myrazeth interjected, her form brightening with emphasis, "they have been contained. The moment you invite them into galactic affairs, you open a door that cannot be closed again." The chamber fell silent as all present contemplated the implications. The human quarantine zone occupied a relatively small section of the galaxy, perhaps 50 systems in total. It wasn't a prison, exactly. Humans were free to travel and trade within their designated space, but they were forbidden from involving themselves in the broader political and military affairs of the galactic community. The restrictions had been put in place after the War of 3 Suns, when the relatively new human civilization had been invited to help resolve a dispute between 2 minor powers. What should have been a simple peacekeeping mission had escalated into a conflict that consumed 3 entire star systems and resulted in the complete extinction of one of the species involved. "The humans claimed they were trying to help," Myrazeth continued, as if reading the thoughts of those present. "They said their actions were necessary to prevent greater bloodshed. Perhaps they even believed it, but the end result was catastrophic." Zector had studied the historical records extensively in preparation for this moment. The War of Three Suns remained one of the most controversial conflicts in galactic history, with scholars still debating whether the humans' actions had been necessary or if alternative solutions existed. "The Zelani would disagree with your assessment," he said carefully. "Their species survives today because of human intervention. Without it, they would have been completely wiped out by the Mordaki Empire." "And the Mordaki," Kalvek hissed, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. "What of them? An entire civilization, billions of individuals, reduced to ash because humans decided they were on the wrong side of history." "They were conducting genocide," Zector shot back, his diplomatic composure cracking slightly. "The humans stopped a campaign of systematic extermination." "By conducting their own campaign of systematic extermination," Myrazeth observed. "This is precisely why humans cannot be trusted with galactic conflicts. They see only binary choices, victory or defeat, right or wrong, survival or death. They have no concept of compromise, no understanding of the subtle balance required to maintain peace across hundreds of worlds and dozens of species." The truth of her words hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Everyone present had heard the stories, the legends that had grown around human military capabilities in the 2 centuries since their quarantine. Some said humans could turn any conflict into a total war. Others claimed they possessed weapons and strategies that defied conventional understanding of galactic warfare. But legends were often exaggerated, Zector reminded himself. The reality was probably much more mundane. Humans were undoubtedly skilled fighters, their rapid conquest of their home system and the speed with which they had established themselves as a galactic presence proved that. But they were still a relatively young species, barely 300 years since their first contact with galactic civilization. "I understand the Council's concerns," Zector said, straightening to his full height and spreading his arms in a gesture of formal petition. "But the alternative is the complete conquest of the Vorthak Empire by the hegemony. Millions of my people dead, dozens of worlds enslaved. Surely the risk of human involvement is preferable to the certainty of hegemony victory." Murmurs of discussion rippled through the chamber as delegates consulted among themselves. The Vorthak request wasn't entirely without precedent. Desperate species had made similar appeals before, but none had been granted permission to approach the humans. "The hegemony has grown bold," admitted Councillor Hevron of the Nexus Coalition, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of concern. "Their recent technological advances have upset the balance of power in their region of space. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative approaches to containment." Kalvek's head swiveled toward the Nexus representative, his serpentine features showing surprise. The Coalition rarely involved itself in matters outside its territory, preferring to maintain strict neutrality in most conflicts. "The Coalition has maintained successful relations with the hegemony for decades," Kalvek said carefully. "I would hate to see misunderstandings arise from hasty decisions made in this chamber." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. The hegemony controlled key trade routes between the Coalition's territory and the galactic core. Economic pressure could be applied if the Coalition supported the Vorthak position. "The Coalition fears no threats," Hevron replied, his optical sensors flashing red briefly. "We simply observe that unchecked expansion by any power disrupts the stability that benefits all civilized species." Zector felt a flutter of hope. If the Coalition was willing to support his petition, other species might follow. The Nexus Coalition commanded significant respect in the council chambers, their advanced technology and disciplined society serving as a model for many younger civilizations. "The question remains," Myrazeth said, her voice cutting through the growing murmur of conversation, "whether the cure would be worse than the disease. Humans do not fight limited wars. They do not understand proportional response. If we grant the Vorthak permission to approach them, we may save one empire only to doom the entire region to chaos. Or," Zector said, seizing the moment of uncertainty, "we may discover that humans have indeed learned restraint during their time in quarantine. 200 years is a long time, even for a species as energetic as humans. Perhaps they've developed new approaches to conflict resolution." The silence that greeted this suggestion was skeptical at best. Several delegates exchanged looks that clearly conveyed their doubts about human capacity for change. "What do you propose?" Myrazeth asked finally. Even if the Council were inclined to grant your request, and I emphasize the hypothetical nature of that statement, we cannot simply lift the quarantine. The protocols exist for good reason. Zector had prepared for this question, though he wasn't sure his proposal would be any more palatable than a complete lifting of restrictions. A limited engagement, he said. Allow us to approach one human system, present our situation, and request assistance. If they agree to help, establish strict parameters for their involvement. No direct intervention in hegemony territory, no targeting of civilian populations, no use of weapons that would cause permanent environmental damage. And who, Kalvak interjected smoothly, would enforce these parameters? Who would ensure that humans honored such restrictions once they became involved in the conflict? It was a valid question, and one Zector had struggled with himself. The historical record showed that humans had difficulty adhering to rules of engagement once fighting began. Their tendency to escalate conflicts was legendary. The Council itself could provide oversight, he suggested, knowing even as he spoke that the idea was problematic. The Council had no military force of its own, no way to physically restrain human actions if they chose to ignore restrictions. Oversight, Myrazeth repeated, her form dimming with skepticism. You ask us to monitor beings whose ancestors once destroyed a star to end a siege. How exactly would we restrain creatures capable of such extremes? The reference to the Corinth incident sent a chill through the chamber. During the War of Three Suns, human forces had indeed collapsed a star to break a siege, though they claimed the stellar collapse had been accidental, a side effect of a weapon test gone wrong. The fact that the action had killed billions of enemy soldiers and civilians was, according to human accounts, an unintended consequence. Whether the stellar collapse had been accidental or deliberate remained a matter of debate among galactic historians. But the fact that humans possessed the capability to destroy stars was indisputable. That was 2 centuries ago, Zector said weakly. Human technology and doctrine have surely evolved since then. Indeed they have, Kalvak said, his voice carrying a note of dark amusement. Recent intelligence suggests their weapons technology has advanced considerably during their isolation. If anything, they've become more dangerous, not less. This was news to Zector, and from the reaction of other delegates, it was news to many of them as well. The hegemony's intelligence services were among the best in the galaxy, but they rarely shared information freely. What kind of advances? Counselor Hevron asked, his mechanical voice sharp with interest. Kalvak's smile revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. The kind that make our ancestors' warnings seem prophetic rather than paranoid. The humans have not been idle during their quarantine. They've been preparing. Preparing for what? Myrazeth demanded, her form flaring brighter with alarm. Unknown, Kalvak admitted. But our monitoring stations along the quarantine border report energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Massive construction projects in the outer systems of human space. Ship designs that defy conventional understanding of physics. The implications hung heavy in the chamber. If humans had been secretly developing advanced weapons during their isolation, the quarantine might not be containing them so much as giving them time to prepare for something larger. All the more reason, Zector said desperately, to approach them now while we still can. If they're planning something, wouldn't it be better to engage with them as allies rather than wait to face them as enemies? It was a reasonable argument, but Zector could see from the expressions around the chamber that fear was overwhelming logic. The mention of human technological advancement had shifted the mood decisively against his petition. The quarantine remains in place, Myrazeth announced, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. The Vorthak Empire's request is denied. You must find another solution to your conflict with the hegemony. Zector felt his hopes crumble, but he made one final attempt. Then you condemn my people to extinction. The hegemony will show no mercy. They'll strip our worlds bare, enslave our survivors, and add our territory to their empire. And when they've grown strong enough, they'll turn their attention to the rest of the galaxy. Perhaps, Myrazeth replied sadly. But the alternative, unleashing humans upon the galaxy once again, might well doom us all. The warning carved in our chamber exists for good reason, Ambassador. We ignore it at our peril. The session was declared closed, and delegates began filing out of the chamber. Kalvak passed close to Zector as they left, his serpentine form radiating satisfaction. A wise decision, the hegemony representative hissed softly. Though I suspect your people will not see it that way. Perhaps when your empire falls, some will remember that it was your council's wisdom that prevented a far greater catastrophe. Alone now except for a few lingering staffers, Zector stared up at the glowing words that had sealed his people's fate. The warning seemed to pulse more brightly now, as if responding to his desperate thoughts. Never drag humans into your wars. But as he walked slowly from the chamber, Zector found himself wondering if the warning cut both ways. Perhaps it wasn't just advice about avoiding human involvement in galactic conflicts. Perhaps it was also a warning about what happened when someone forced humans to become involved. The thought followed him all the way back to his quarters, where reports of fresh hegemony victories waited on his communication console. The war was going badly, worse than even his most pessimistic projections had suggested. Without outside help, the Vorthak Empire would fall within 6 months. Zector sat heavily in his chair and began composing his report to the Vorthak High Command. He would have to tell them that the Council had refused their request, that no help would come from the galactic community. He would have to explain that they were alone. But even as he wrote the words of defeat, another part of his mind was already working on alternatives. The Council had forbidden him from approaching humans officially, but they hadn't forbidden all contact. There were always unofficial channels, independent traders and explorers who operated in the gray areas between civilized space and the quarantine zone. The warning in the council chambers was clear: never drag humans into your wars. But what if humans chose to involve themselves? What if they decided on their own that the balance of galactic power needed adjustment? Zector finished his report and sent it through encrypted channels to his homeworld. Then he began composing a very different kind of message, one that would travel through very different channels to a small trading post on the edge of human space. The warning had been clear, but warnings, Zector reflected, sometimes came too late. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the biometric scanner and waited for the soft chime that indicated her clearance had been accepted. The doors to the Strategic Intelligence Division slid open with barely a whisper, revealing corridors lined with the kind of advanced shielding that made electronic surveillance impossible. She'd been expecting the summons for 3 days now, ever since the monitoring stations along the quarantine border had detected the encrypted transmission burst from Galactic Council space. The message itself had been intercepted and decoded within hours, but the response to it had required careful consideration at the highest levels of Terran command. Admiral Zhang Wei looked up from his holographic displays as Chen entered his office. The projection showed tactical assessments of the Vorthak hegemony conflict, updated in real time by intelligence gathering operations that officially didn't exist. "Captain," Zhang said without preamble, "how long has your team been monitoring the situation in the outer reaches?" Chen took the offered chair across from his desk. 18 months, sir. Since the hegemony began their expansion campaign, we've been tracking fleet movements, battle outcomes, technological developments." "Your assessment?" "The Vorthak are losing badly," Chen replied without hesitation. "Their tactical doctrine is outdated, their technology inferior, and their leadership is making critical strategic errors. At current casualty rates, they'll cease to exist as an effective fighting force within 6 months. Zhang nodded, his weathered features showing no surprise. The Admiral had been commanding intelligence operations when Chen was still in primary school. He'd seen the rise and fall of a dozen galactic powers during his career. And the hegemony, growing stronger with each victory. They're not just conquering Vorthak territory, they're integrating it. Shipyards, research facilities, population centers. They're building an empire designed to last millennia. The holographic display shifted, showing projected territorial boundaries if current trends continued. The hegemony's influence would spread across nearly a quarter of the local galactic arm within a century. "Normally," Zhang said, "this would be none of our concern. The quarantine protocols are clear. We don't involve ourselves in galactic politics. But this message from Ambassador Zector changes things." Chen had read the decoded transmission, of course. The Vorthak ambassador's request for an unofficial meeting had been surprisingly well crafted, considering it had been transmitted through black market channels and encoded using outdated human cryptography methods. "He's desperate," she observed. The council rejected his petition, so he's trying end runs around official channels. Desperate beings do desperate things, Zhang agreed. But this particular desperate thing might serve our purposes. Tell me, Captain, what do you know about the hegemony's recent technological acquisitions? Chen frowned. Sir, their tech base has been advancing steadily, but nothing remarkable. Standard improvements in weapons efficiency, shield technology, faster-than-light communications. Zhang's expression suggested she was missing something important. He touched a control on his desk, and the holographic display shifted to show technical schematics that made Chen's breath catch in her throat. These are hegemony ship designs from 6 months ago, Zhang said. Note the power distribution networks, the weapon placement, the shield generators. The ships displayed were typical of hegemony engineering, functional, efficient, but nothing revolutionary. Chen had seen similar designs from a dozen different galactic powers. Now, Zhang continued, these are intelligence images taken 3 weeks ago. The new ships were completely different. Sleeker, more advanced, with energy signatures that didn't match anything in Terran databases. The weapon systems alone represented a quantum leap in destructive capability. How is that possible? Chen asked. Technological development doesn't work that way. You can't jump from fusion-based weapons to whatever these are in 6 months. You can if someone gives you the technology, Zhang replied grimly. Our xenoarchaeology teams have identified the design elements. These ships incorporate precursor technology. The word hit Chen like a physical blow. Precursor artifacts were among the most closely guarded secrets in galactic civilization. The ancient race that had dominated the galaxy millions of years before had left behind technological marvels that even modern science could barely comprehend. Most galactic powers had strict laws governing precursor sites, and the few artifacts that had been successfully studied had led to revolutionary advances. The hegemony found a cache, she asked. We don't think they found it, Zhang said. We think it was given to them. Intelligence suggests they've formed an alliance with someone who has access to significant precursor resources. The implications were staggering. If the hegemony had reliable access to precursor technology, they wouldn't just dominate their local region. They could potentially challenge even the most advanced galactic civilizations. Who would do that? Chen asked. What species has both access to precursor tech and reason to arm the hegemony? Zhang's smile was cold. That's an excellent question, Captain, and one we need answered before this situation spirals completely out of control. He touched another control, and the display shifted to show a stellar map of the local galactic region. The hegemony's territory was marked in red, expanding steadily toward the boundaries of more established galactic powers. If the hegemony continues expanding with precursor-enhanced technology, they'll eventually come into conflict with the Etherian Collective, the Nexus Coalition, maybe even the Core Worlds Alliance. When that happens, the balance of power that's kept the galaxy relatively stable for the last 5 centuries will collapse. Chen studied the projections, her tactical training automatically calculating probable outcomes. Galactic war, she said quietly. Not just regional conflicts, but system-wide warfare on a scale we haven't seen since the Unification Wars. Exactly, and when that war comes, the quarantine won't protect us. We'll be dragged into the conflict, whether we want to be or not. It was a sobering thought. The human quarantine had been designed to prevent humans from destabilizing galactic politics, but it wouldn't help if galactic politics destabilized itself around them. What does Command want us to do? Chen asked. Zhang leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The official position is that we maintain the quarantine and observe events from a distance. Unofficially, there's growing sentiment that we need to take a more active role in shaping outcomes. Meaning we're going to accept Ambassador Zector's invitation for an unofficial meeting. You're going to represent Terran interests in those negotiations. Chen felt a familiar surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Field operations beyond the quarantine zone were rare, and this one carried enormous potential consequences. What are my parameters? She asked. Officially, you're a private citizen engaged in independent trade negotiations. No connection to Terran command, no authority to speak for human government. If things go wrong, we disavow all knowledge of your activities. The standard cover for deniable operations. Chen had used similar covers before, though never for something this significant. Unofficially, you have broad discretion to explore options for addressing the hegemony threat. If the Vorthak situation can be resolved in a way that serves our interests, you're authorized to provide assistance. Zhang pulled out a small data storage device and placed it on the desk between them. This contains everything we know about hegemony operations, precursor technology applications, and potential response scenarios. Study it carefully. Lives will depend on your decisions. Chen picked up the device, noting its weight. The information it contained probably represented decades of intelligence gathering and analysis. Timeline. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at Freeport Station. It's technically in neutral space, though the hegemony has been pressuring the station management to restrict access to certain species. Your window for safe operations is probably limited. Freeport Station was one of the few truly independent facilities in the local galactic region. Built into a massive asteroid on the edge of several territorial boundaries, it served as a trading post and meeting ground for species that preferred to avoid official diplomatic channels. Transportation. The merchant vessel Star's Edge will be departing for Freeport in 6 hours. Captain Morrison has carried out operations for us before. You can trust him to get you there and back safely. Chen nodded. Morrison was a good choice. Skilled pilot, reliable under pressure, and absolutely unconnected to official human government activities. Any other operational considerations I should know about? Zhang hesitated before answering. The hegemony knows about the meeting. Their intelligence services are quite good, and they've probably identified Zector's unofficial activities. Expect surveillance, possibly interference. How direct? Unknown. They might simply observe, or they might try to prevent the meeting entirely. Your safety is not guaranteed. It was a risk Chen had accepted when she joined Strategic Intelligence. Operations beyond the quarantine zone always carried the possibility of capture or death without official support. Understood, sir. Is there anything else? Zhang stood, indicating the meeting was over. Just one thing, Captain. Remember that you're representing more than just human interests in these negotiations. Your actions could determine whether the galaxy slides into chaos or maintains the relative stability we've all enjoyed for the past 2 centuries. Chen stood as well, slipping the data device into her jacket pocket. No pressure at all, sir. None whatsoever, Zhang replied with a slight smile. Just the fate of galactic civilization hanging in the balance. As Chen left the Strategic Intelligence Division and made her way toward the departure bays, she reflected on the irony of the situation. Humans had been quarantined to prevent them from destabilizing galactic politics, but now galactic politics was threatening to destabilize itself. The very isolation that was supposed to protect other species from human interference might end up being the key to saving them. The Star's Edge was a typical merchant vessel, unremarkable in appearance, moderately armed, with cargo holds that could be reconfigured for a variety of purposes. Captain Morrison greeted her at the airlock with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested he knew exactly what kind of passenger he was carrying. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Chen," he said, using her cover identity. "I understand you're interested in exploring new trade opportunities in the outer reaches." "That's right," she replied, playing her part. "I've heard Freeport Station offers access to some very interesting markets." "Indeed it does, though I should mention that the route has become somewhat more challenging recently. Increased patrol activity, you understand." Morrison's warning was subtle but clear. The hegemony was tightening security in the region, making unauthorized travel more dangerous. "I appreciate the heads-up, Captain. How long to reach our destination?" 48 hours, assuming we don't encounter any complications along the way. As the Star's Edge cleared the docking bay and began accelerating toward the edge of human space, Chen settled into her quarters and began reviewing the intelligence files Zhang had given her. The technical specifications for hegemony ships made for fascinating reading, but it was the strategic assessments that truly concerned her. The hegemony wasn't just winning their war with the Vorthak, they were winning it too easily. Their casualty rates were minimal, their territorial gains substantial, and their technological advantages were growing with each battle. It was the kind of overwhelming superiority that suggested external support on a massive scale. But who would provide such support and why? The obvious candidates, advanced species like the Etherians or the Core Worlds Alliance, had no reason to strengthen the hegemony. If anything, a powerful hegemony would threaten their own interests. That left less obvious possibilities. Rogue elements within established governments, independent power brokers with access to restricted technology, or species that operated outside the normal structure of galactic civilization. Or Chen thought with a chill, precursor technology that was operating autonomously, following programming established millions of years ago by beings whose motivations remained completely unknown. She pushed that disturbing thought aside and continued reading. Tomorrow's meeting with Ambassador Zector would require careful handling. The Vorthak were desperate, which made them potentially valuable allies, but also unpredictable. Their defeat seemed inevitable unless something dramatic changed the balance of the conflict. The question was whether human intervention could provide that dramatic change without triggering the kind of escalation that had led to the quarantine in the first place. Chen would have to navigate between the Scylla of inaction and the Charybdis of excessive force, finding a solution that served human interests without destabilizing the entire galactic region. As the Star's Edge jumped to faster-than-light travel and began crossing the vast distance toward Freeport Station, Chen wondered if she was about to make history or repeat it. The choice, she supposed, would depend on whether humanity had truly learned the lessons of the War of Three Suns, or whether they were destined to make the same mistakes on an even larger scale. The warning carved in the Galactic Council chambers echoed in her mind. Never drag humans into your wars. But sometimes, Chen reflected, humans didn't need to be dragged. Sometimes they chose to get involved all on their own. Freeport Station sprawled across the surface of asteroid designation XK 739 like a metal cancer, its corridors and docking bays carved directly into the rock. Sarah Chen followed the flow of beings through the main concourse, her enhanced vision automatically cataloging the dozen different species represented in the crowd. The station served as neutral ground for entities that preferred to conduct business away from governmental oversight. Pirates rubbed shoulders with legitimate merchants, while diplomats from species technically at war with each other shared drinks in the same establishments. It was exactly the kind of place where an unofficial meeting between a desperate ambassador and a human intelligence officer could take place without attracting undue attention. Chen's neural implant chimed softly, indicating she'd received the coded message she'd been waiting for. The text appeared briefly in her peripheral vision. Observatory 7, 1 hour, come alone. She deleted the message and continued browsing the merchant stalls that lined the concourse, maintaining the appearance of a trader looking for profitable opportunities. Her actual destination was 3 levels up, in the section of the station reserved for what the management diplomatically called private consultations. Observatory 7 turned out to be a small conference room with a transparent aluminum window that looked out into space. The view was spectacular, stars stretched to infinity, unmarred by the light pollution that characterized inhabited systems. Chen arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time checking for surveillance devices and identifying escape routes. Ambassador Zector entered precisely on time, his 4 eyes scanning the room with the paranoid intensity of someone whose life had been threatened recently. He was smaller than Chen had expected, his chitinous exoskeleton showing stress fractures that indicated either advanced age or recent trauma. "Ms. Chen," he said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into accented standard. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I wasn't certain humans would be interested in our situation." Chen gestured for him to take a seat at the small table that dominated the room. "My organization is always interested in maintaining regional stability, Ambassador. Your message suggested the current conflict threatens that stability." Zector's mandibles clicked nervously as he settled into a chair designed for his species' anatomy. "The situation is worse than our public statements indicate. The hegemony has achieved total space superiority in our home system. Our shipyards have been destroyed, our fleet reduced to less than 30 operational vessels." The numbers matched Chen's intelligence briefings, but hearing them confirmed by someone with first-hand knowledge drove home the desperate nature of the Vorthak position. "What kind of assistance are you looking for?" she asked. "Any kind," Zector replied bluntly. "Weapons, ships, tactical advice, training for our personnel. We're willing to negotiate favorable trade agreements, mining rights, even territorial concessions in exchange for help. It was the kind of sweeping offer that indicated genuine desperation. The Vorthak Empire had been a significant regional power less than 3 years ago. The speed of their collapse suggested something beyond normal military defeat. "Tell me about the hegemony's technological advantages," Chen said. "Our intelligence suggests they've made significant improvements to their fleet capabilities." Zector's primary eyes focused on her, while his secondary pair continued scanning the room for threats. "You know about the new ships?" "We know they exist. We're curious about their capabilities." "Devastating," Zector said simply. "Their weapons can penetrate our strongest shields without difficulty. Their hulls seem immune to our most powerful ordnance. In our last major engagement, they destroyed 47 of our ships while sustaining 0 casualties." Chen made a note in her neural implant while maintaining eye contact with the ambassador. 0 casualties in a major engagement suggested technology so advanced it bordered on the impossible. "How long have they possessed these capabilities?" 6 months. Before that, our forces were evenly matched. The war was costly but winnable. Then they unveiled the new ship designs and everything changed. 6 months matched the timeline in Zhang's intelligence briefings. Whatever had provided the hegemony with their technological advantage, it had been a recent development. "Do you have any intelligence on the source of their improvements?" Zector hesitated, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what Chen recognized as a sign of extreme agitation. "This must not leave this room," he said finally. "You have my word. We captured one of their new vessels 3 months ago. Our technical teams had 6 days to examine it before hegemony forces recovered the wreck." "What they found?" Zector paused, seeming to struggle with the implications of what he was about to say. "The ship's core systems were built around precursor technology." Chen kept her expression neutral despite the confirmation of her worst fears. "How much precursor technology?" "Not just components or artifacts, complete systems. The power generation, the weapon targeting, the propulsion, all precursor design. Our engineers said it was the most advanced technology they'd ever encountered." The implications were staggering. If the hegemony had access to functional precursor systems rather than just archaeological fragments, their technological advantage could grow exponentially. Precursor technology was self-improving, capable of upgrading itself and adapting to new challenges. "Where did they get it?" Chen asked. "Unknown. Our intelligence networks have been decimated, and the hegemony guards this secret more carefully than their strategic battle plans. But someone is providing them with a steady supply of precursor technology." Chen leaned back in her chair, processing the information. The situation was even worse than Terran Command had believed. The hegemony wasn't just using isolated precursor artifacts. They were integrating complete technological systems into their military infrastructure. "Ambassador," she said finally, "I need to be completely honest with you about something. My government cannot officially involve itself in your conflict. The quarantine protocols are absolute, and violating them would create political complications we're not prepared to handle." Zector's exoskeleton seemed to deflate as his hopes for official human assistance crumbled. "Then my people are doomed." "I said my government cannot become officially involved," Chen continued. "I didn't say we couldn't help." The ambassador's 4 eyes fixed on her with sudden intensity. "Explain." "There are unofficial channels through which assistance might be provided. Private military contractors, independent weapons dealers, freelance tactical advisors. Officially, these would be private citizens acting without governmental authorization." It was the kind of plausible deniability that allowed major powers to involve themselves in conflicts without triggering formal diplomatic crises. The Etherian collective had perfected the technique centuries ago. "What kind of assistance?" Zector asked carefully. Chen activated a small holographic projector and displayed a simplified technical schematic. "Weapon systems that might be effective against precursor-enhanced shields. Ship designs optimized for fighting technologically superior opponents. Tactical doctrines developed specifically for asymmetric warfare." The ambassador studied the projections with growing excitement. "These designs, they're human. Developed over the past 2 centuries, Chen confirmed. We've had time to think about various theoretical scenarios. She didn't mention that one of those scenarios had been defending against other human factions, equipped with precursor technology. The civil wars that had shaped human space during the early quarantine period had driven rapid innovation in military technology. The cost, Zector asked. Information, Chen replied. Everything you know about hegemony operations, their supply lines, their technological development programs. And when this conflict ends, we want exclusive access to any precursor technology that changes hands. It was a reasonable request that served multiple purposes. Human intelligence needed detailed information about hegemony capabilities, and access to precursor technology would help balance the galactic scales of power. Agreed, Zector said without hesitation. When can we begin? Immediately. The first shipment can be ready within 72 hours. But Ambassador, I need you to understand something crucial about how humans conduct warfare. Zector's mandibles went still, indicating complete attention. We don't fight limited engagements. We don't honor gentlemen's agreements about proportional response. When humans commit to a conflict, we commit completely. If you accept our assistance, this war will escalate beyond anything you've experienced. The warning was both tactical advice and psychological warfare. Chen wanted the hegemony to understand, when human weapons started appearing on Vorthak ships, that they were facing an enemy that played by very different rules. The hegemony shows no restraint, Zector pointed out. They target civilian populations, destroy cultural sites, enslave captured populations. How could human involvement make things worse? Chen smiled, and Zector suddenly understood why other species feared humanity. Because when we fight, we don't just defeat our enemies, she said. We make them extinct. The observatory fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Outside the window, stars wheeled slowly as the asteroid rotated on its axis. The Galactic Council warned never to drag humans into your wars, Chen continued. They didn't warn about what happens when humans drag themselves into your wars. Zector considered this for several minutes, his 4 eyes reflecting the starlight as he weighed the implications of accepting human assistance. Finally, he spoke. My people are already facing extinction at hegemony hands. If choosing human allies simply changes the method of our destruction, then at least we'll die fighting. Ambassador, Chen said, you're not going to die fighting, you're going to win. And when you do, every species in the galaxy is going to remember that humans keep their promises. She stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Zector reached out with one of his primary arms and grasped her fingers with his chitinous manipulators. Welcome to the war, Chen said. As they shook hands, neither of them noticed the small surveillance device that had been monitoring their conversation from its position behind a decorative panel. The device transmitted a brief burst of encrypted data toward a hegemony intelligence ship stationed 3 light towers away from Freeport Station. Admiral Kethval received the transmission 18 minutes later while reviewing casualty reports from the latest Vorthak engagement. The news that humans were planning to involve themselves in the conflict caused him to dismiss his staff and lock himself in his private quarters. He activated a secure communication channel that reached across dozens of light years to a system that didn't appear on any galactic charts. The response came almost immediately, in the form of energy patterns that bypassed his ship's communication systems entirely and spoke directly to his consciousness. The humans present complications, Kethval thought, knowing his mental voice would be heard clearly. Indeed, came the reply, carrying overtones of amusement that made the Admiral's scales crawl with unease. But also opportunities. Human involvement will provide excellent justification for accelerated deployment of enhanced technologies. Kethval had been working with his alien benefactors for 18 months, but he still didn't fully understand their motivations. They provided precursor technology freely, asked for little in return except expansion of hegemony territory, and seemed to view galactic politics as an entertaining game. The humans are dangerous, he warned. Historical records indicate they're capable of extreme escalation. We are aware of human capabilities, came the mental response. We find them intriguing. It has been millennia since we encountered a species with such potential for creative destruction. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Kethval staring out at the stars and wondering what he had gotten his people involved with. The precursor technology had seemed like a gift from the gods when it was first offered. Now he suspected it might be something considerably more sinister. But the hegemony had come too far to turn back now. Their expansion campaign had created enemies throughout the local galactic region. Without continued access to advanced technology, they would be destroyed by the forces they had antagonized. Kethval activated his ship's communication systems and began issuing orders to his fleet commanders. If humans were entering the conflict, the hegemony would need to accelerate their timetable significantly. Meanwhile, aboard the Star's Edge, Chen was composing a detailed report for Admiral Zhang. The meeting with Ambassador Zector had gone better than expected, but the intelligence about precursor technology integration was deeply troubling. The hegemony wasn't just using ancient artifacts. They were incorporating complete technological systems into their military infrastructure. That suggested access to either a massive precursor cache or, worse, direct contact with whatever force had created the technology in the first place. Either way, the situation was spiraling beyond anything the galactic community had previously experienced. The Vorthak hegemony conflict was about to become something much larger and more dangerous. As the Star's Edge jumped back toward human space, Chen reflected on the irony of the situation. The Galactic Council's warning about never dragging humans into wars had been intended to protect other species from human military capabilities. But sometimes the greatest danger came not from being dragged into a conflict, but from choosing to enter one. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between humans fighting because they had to and humans fighting because they wanted to. Chen suspected the lesson would be memorable for everyone involved. The first hegemony ship to encounter human-supplied weapons died without ever understanding what had killed it. Commander Vexthal had been conducting a routine patrol of the Cathara system when his sensors detected a small Vorthak vessel attempting to flee toward the outer planets. Standard procedure was to disable the ship's engines and capture any survivors for interrogation. His destroyer, the Crushing Tide, approached the fleeing vessel with casual confidence. Vorthak ships had proven incapable of damaging hegemony vessels equipped with precursor technology. This engagement would be another routine capture. The Vorthak ship suddenly reversed course and charged directly toward the Crushing Tide, its weapons systems powering up. Vexthal's tactical officer reported energy signatures unlike anything in their database, but the commander wasn't concerned. Whatever new weapons the Vorthak had acquired, they couldn't possibly penetrate precursor-enhanced shields. The first salvo proved him catastrophically wrong. Plasma bolts that burned with the heat of stellar cores tore through the Crushing Tide's shields as if they didn't exist. The destroyer's hull, reinforced with precursor materials that had previously made it virtually indestructible, began to buckle and melt under the assault. Vexthal had just enough time to send a distress signal before his ship exploded with the fury of a miniature star. The engagement lasted 47 seconds from first contact to final destruction. The Vorthak vessel suffered no damage and continued toward its original destination, leaving only debris and radiation to mark the site of the Crushing Tide's destruction. Admiral Kethval received the sensor recordings 6 hours later aboard his flagship, the Dominant Will. He watched the tactical replay 3 times before he fully believed what he was seeing. Precursor technology wasn't supposed to be vulnerable to conventional weapons, no matter how advanced. Analysis, he ordered his technical staff. Chief Engineer Mordain, a silicon-based being whose crystalline structure allowed for rapid data processing, presented his findings with visible agitation. The Vorthak weapons appear to utilize containment fields that concentrate stellar-level plasma in focused beams. The energy density is sufficient to overwhelm even precursor defensive systems through sheer thermal output. Kethval studied the technical readouts with growing unease. How is such technology possible? Our intelligence indicates the Vorthak lack the engineering capabilities for this level of weapon development. The weapons are not a Vorthak design, Mordain replied. Energy signatures and construction techniques indicate human origin. The bridge fell silent. Every member of Kethval's staff understood the implications of human involvement in the conflict. The historical records were clear about what happened when humans decided to participate in galactic wars. Confirmation, Kethval asked. Material analysis of debris recovered from the engagement site shows human manufacturing techniques. Isotopic signatures match those found in quarantine zone industrial facilities. Kethval dismissed his staff and activated the secure communication channel that connected him to his alien benefactors. The response came immediately, carrying undertones of satisfaction that made his scales crawl. "You seem agitated," the mental voice observed. "The humans have provided the Vorthak with weapons capable of destroying our enhanced vessels," Kethval thought back. This development was not anticipated. On the contrary, came the reply. This development was inevitable. Human military capabilities are precisely what make this conflict interesting. Kethval felt a chill that had nothing to do with his ship's environmental systems. "You wanted human involvement." "We required it asterisk," the alien consciousness corrected. "The conflict serves multiple purposes, Admiral. Expansion of hegemony territory was merely the most obvious objective." "What are your real objectives?" "Observation, assessment, preparation. Humanity represents a significant variable in galactic development. We wish to understand their capabilities before implementing the next phase of our plans." The communication ended, leaving Kethval staring out at the stars and wondering what he had gotten his people involved with. His alien benefactors had presented themselves as generous partners, offering advanced technology in exchange for territorial expansion. Now it seemed they had been manipulating events to engineer a conflict with humanity. But the hegemony had come too far to withdraw now. Their expansion campaign had created enemies throughout the region. Without continued support from their alien allies, they would face destruction at the hands of the species they had conquered. Kethval activated his fleet communication systems and began issuing new orders. If his benefactors wanted to observe human military capabilities, they would need to accelerate deployment of the most advanced precursor technologies available. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room buried deep beneath the surface of Terra, Admiral Zhang Wei was briefing the Terran Defense Council on developments in the Vorthak conflict. "The first engagement exceeded all projections," he reported to the assembled military and political leaders. "Hegemony forces were completely unprepared for human weapon technology. Their ship was destroyed in under a minute." Defense Minister Williams leaned forward in her chair, her expression concerned. What was their response? "Immediate tactical analysis, followed by requests for enhanced technology from their unknown benefactors. Intelligence suggests they're receiving significant upgrades to their fleet capabilities." The holographic display in the center of the room showed updated technical assessments of hegemony ships. The new designs incorporated even more advanced precursor systems, including defensive technologies that had previously been theoretical. "Recommendations?" asked General Morrison, the Defense Council's senior military advisor. Zhang activated a series of tactical projections that filled the room with three-dimensional star maps and battle simulations. "Escalate our support for the Vorthak. The current level of assistance won't be sufficient if the hegemony continues receiving technology upgrades." "Define escalation," Williams said carefully. "Phase 2 weapons release. Quantum disruptors, temporal acceleration fields, reality manipulation systems." The silence that greeted this suggestion was profound. Phase 2 technologies were humanity's most closely guarded secrets, developed during the civil wars that had shaped human space in the early quarantine period. They represented weapons that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics within limited areas. "The diplomatic consequences," Williams began, "will be severe if we're discovered," Zhang agreed. "But the alternative is allowing an unknown force to dominate the local galactic region using precursor technology. If we don't act now, we may face the same enemies later under much less favorable circumstances." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours and involved classified intelligence assessments that painted a disturbing picture of galactic instability. The hegemony's expansion wasn't occurring in isolation. Similar conflicts were developing in 3 other regions of local space, all involving the sudden appearance of advanced technology among previously minor powers. The pattern suggested coordination on a scale that encompassed multiple galactic regions. Someone or something was deliberately destabilizing the established order, using local conflicts as a testing ground for advanced weapon systems. Authorization granted, Williams announced finally. Phase 2 weapons release approved for Vorthak forces, all engagements to maintain plausible deniability. If questioned, the weapons are reverse-engineered precursor technology. Meanwhile, aboard a Vorthak supply depot hidden in the Terminus Nebula, Captain Sarah Chen was overseeing the installation of humanity's latest military gift. The quantum disruptor looked deceptively simple, a crystalline device no larger than a human fist that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. When properly integrated into ship weapon systems, it could erase enemy vessels from existence without leaving any debris to analyze. Installation complete, reported Chief Engineer Velter, the Vorthak technical specialist Chen had been working with for the past week. Energy coupling is stable, targeting systems are calibrated. Chen nodded, though part of her wondered if they were crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Quantum disruptors had been used only twice in human history, both times during the dark period of the Civil Wars when entire colonies had been fighting for survival. Test firing, Velter asked. Use the asteroid fragment we brought in, Chen replied. Full power, but keep the duration short. The weapon fired, and a chunk of rock the size of a city block simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field, no energy release, just complete annihilation at the quantum level. Velter's 4 eyes widened with what Chen recognized as a mixture of awe and terror. This technology, it should not be possible. Human engineering tends to specialize in impossible technologies, Chen observed. The question is whether you're prepared to use weapons like this against living targets. The Vorthak engineer's mandibles clicked nervously. The hegemony has shown no mercy to our civilians. They've enslaved entire colonies, destroyed cultural sites that took millennia to build, if these weapons can stop them. They can, Chen confirmed. But understand that once you start using quantum disruptors, there's no going back. The enemy won't surrender. They'll either flee or escalate to their most powerful weapons. This conflict is about to become a war of extinction. Velter looked out through the depot's main viewport at the nebula that concealed their operations. Somewhere beyond the swirling clouds of gas and dust, hegemony fleets were preparing for their next assault on Vorthak space. My species is already facing extinction, he said finally. At least this way, we have a chance to take our enemies with us. Chen activated her communication implant and sent a coded message to Admiral Zhang. The weapons transfer was complete, and Vorthak forces would be ready for combat operations within 48 hours. As she composed her report, Chen reflected on the irony of the situation. The Galactic Council had established the quarantine to prevent humans from involving themselves in galactic conflicts. But sometimes the greatest threat to galactic stability came from forces that had learned to manipulate others into fighting their battles for them. The hegemony's unknown benefactors had engineered this conflict to test human military capabilities. What they probably didn't understand was that humans responded to tests by cheating, escalating, and rewriting the rules of engagement until victory became inevitable. The galaxy was about to learn why the warning in the council chambers was necessary, and why some wars should never be started in the first place. 3 days later, the Hegemony Task Force assigned to reduce the Vorthak stronghold at Kepler's Gate encountered weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The engagement lasted 18 minutes, and when it was over, 12 Hegemony ships had been completely erased from reality. The survivors fled back to Hegemony space carrying sensor recordings that would force their alien benefactors to reveal technologies they had planned to keep secret for decades longer. The war was escalating exactly as Chen had predicted, and the escalation was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened amid rumors that reality itself had become a weapon in the Vorthak hegemony conflict. Ambassador Zector stood before the assembled delegates with sensor recordings that defied explanation, while Councillor Myerazeth's energy form flickered with barely controlled agitation. "You claim," she said, her crystalline voice sharp with disbelief, "that entire hegemony fleets have simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, but completely removed from reality." Zector activated his holographic projector, displaying the tactical recordings from the Battle of Kepler's Gate. 12 hegemony ships approached a Vorthak defensive position, engaged for exactly 18 minutes, then simply vanished. No energy signatures, no debris fields, no trace that they had ever existed except for the sensor records. The weapons responsible appear to function by disrupting quantum fields at the subatomic level, he explained, though his understanding of the technology was limited. Matter exposed to the effect undergoes what our physicists term existence failure. Representative Kalvak of the hegemony rose from his delegation's seating area, his serpentine form radiating fury and fear in equal measure. These weapons are an abomination. They violate every treaty governing warfare between civilized species. As did the precursor technology you've been using, Zector replied coolly. Your ships have been immune to conventional weapons for months. We merely found a way to level the battlefield. The truth was more complex than either ambassador was willing to admit publicly. Both sides now possessed weapons that pushed the boundaries of known science, and neither fully understood the forces they had unleashed. Counselor Hevron of the Nexus Coalition spoke next, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of deep concern. The quantum disruption effects you describe match theoretical weapons that have been considered impossible to build. What species provided you with this technology? It was the question everyone in the chamber wanted answered, though Zector's response was predictable. The Vorthak Empire developed these weapons through our own research programs, he lied smoothly. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. No one believed him, of course. The Vorthak lacked the technological infrastructure to develop such advanced weapons independently, but proving the involvement of another species would require evidence that none of the assembled delegates possessed. Myrazeth's form brightened with suspicion. If you develop these weapons yourselves, surely you can provide technical specifications to prove they comply with galactic warfare conventions. Zector's mandibles clicked nervously. The technology is classified for obvious reasons. We cannot risk it falling into hostile hands. Whose hands? Kalvak hissed. You speak as if there are powers in this conflict beyond the hegemony and your dying empire. The accusation hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Everyone present suspected that outside forces were manipulating the conflict, but no one wanted to be the first to make direct accusations. The deadlock was broken by an announcement that sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Long-range sensors had detected a massive fleet moving toward the conflict zone from the direction of the quarantine sector. Admiral Zhang Wei materialized as a holographic projection in the center of the council chamber, his image transmitted across dozens of light years from the bridge of the Terran flagship Indomitable. His appearance caused a stir among the delegates. Humans rarely communicated directly with the Galactic Council. Honorable counselors, Zhang said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who commanded planet-killing weapons. I apologize for this intrusion, but recent developments require immediate clarification. Myrazeth's energy form flared with alarm. Admiral Zhang, the quarantine protocols strictly forbid human involvement in galactic conflicts. Your presence here constitutes a violation of treaties that have maintained peace for 2 centuries. The quarantine protocols, Zhang replied calmly, were designed to prevent humans from destabilizing galactic politics through military intervention. They were not designed to prevent us from defending ourselves against external threats. What external threats? Kalvak demanded. The conflict is between the hegemony and the Vorthak Empire. Humanity has not been attacked. Zhang's smile was cold enough to freeze helium. Haven't we? Counselor, are you familiar with the energy signatures emanating from your enhanced fleet vessels? The question caught Kalvak off guard. What relevance do our ship designs have to human security concerns? Your ships are powered by precursor technology that matches artifacts recovered from systems destroyed during the War of 3 Suns, Zhang continued. The same technology that was used to attack human colonies 2 centuries ago. The implications rippled through the chamber like shockwaves. If the hegemony was using technology connected to ancient attacks on humanity, the quarantine protocols might not apply to human response actions. Myrazeth processed this information with visible distress. Admiral, are you claiming the current conflict is connected to events from 2 centuries past? I'm claiming, Zhang said, That the force providing technology to the hegemony has been planning this conflict for a very long time, long enough to engineer circumstances that would draw humanity into a galactic war despite the quarantine restrictions. He activated his own holographic projector, displaying sensor data that made several delegates recoil in fear. The images showed massive structures hidden in the void between star systems, constructs that dwarfed even the largest space stations. These facilities have been operating in deep space for decades, possibly centuries, Zhang continued. They are manufacturing precursor technology and distributing it to selected species throughout the galaxy. The hegemony is just one of several recipients. Kalvak's serpentine form coiled with tension. You accuse us of conspiracy based on speculation and sensor ghosts. I accuse you of being manipulated, Zhang corrected. Just as the Vorthak were manipulated into requesting human assistance, someone has been orchestrating this entire conflict to achieve specific objectives. What objectives? Counselor Hevron asked. Zhang's expression grew grim. To force humanity out of quarantine, to study our military capabilities under combat conditions, to determine whether humans represent a threat to whatever force has been hiding in the galactic deep for the past several millennia. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the implications. If Zhang was correct, both sides in the current conflict had been played by an intelligence that operated on timescales measured in geological epochs. The force responsible, Zhang continued, made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that studying human military capabilities would reveal weaknesses they could exploit. Instead, they've demonstrated to humanity that the quarantine was never about protecting other species from us. It was about protecting us from them. Myrazeth's energy form pulsed with distress. Admiral, you speak of threats that have remained hidden for millennia. What evidence do you have that these entities mean harm to the galactic community? Zhang's holographic projection shifted to display what appeared to be construction blueprints on a galactic scale. The designs showed modifications to star systems, the creation of artificial stellar phenomena, and the systematic harvesting of entire worlds. These are the plans we've recovered from captured precursor facilities, he said. They call it the Great Cleansing, the systematic removal of all sapient life from the galaxy to be replaced by engineered species more suitable to their purposes. The reaction was immediate and violent. Several delegates began shouting demands for evidence, while others called for immediate military action. The careful diplomatic protocols that governed council sessions broke down entirely as species representatives grappled with the possibility of extinction-level threats. Order, Myrazeth commanded, her voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that enforced calm. Admiral Zhang, these claims require substantiation. If such a threat exists, why has it remained hidden until now? Because, Zhang replied, they needed time to study the galactic community's military capabilities before implementing their plans. The conflicts they've been engineering serve as field tests for both their own weapons and ours. He paused, allowing the implications to sink in before delivering the final blow. The Great Cleansing was scheduled to begin in 50 years. Our intervention in the current conflict has forced them to accelerate their timeline. They're coming now, and they're bringing everything they have. Long-range sensors throughout the council chamber began detecting massive energy signatures moving in from the galactic rim. The approaching forces were larger than anything in recorded history, and their technology signatures matched the precursor artifacts that had been appearing throughout the galaxy. What do you propose? Myrazeth asked, her energy form dimming with resignation. Total mobilization, Zhang replied without hesitation. Every species, every fleet, every weapon system in the galaxy focused on one objective, survival. The quarantine protocols are suspended indefinitely. Humanity is officially entering galactic politics, and we're bringing everything we've developed during 2 centuries of isolation. The chamber erupted again as delegates struggled to process the magnitude of what Zhang was proposing. A complete restructuring of galactic civilization, the abandonment of treaties that had maintained peace for centuries, and the militarization of entire stellar regions. And if we refuse? Kalvak asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Zhang's smile returned, carrying implications that made every delegate remember why humans had been quarantined in the first place. Then you'll face the Great Cleansing alone, with whatever forces you can muster independently. Humanity will retreat to our core systems and prepare to defend ourselves when the survivors finish falling. It wasn't really a choice, and everyone present understood that. The approaching forces represented an extinction-level threat to galactic civilization. Without human military capabilities, resistance would be futile. The vote, Myrazeth announced wearily, is for full mobilization under Terran command structure, all in favor. The result was unanimous, though several delegates appeared physically ill as they cast their votes. As the session ended, and delegates began the grim task of preparing their species for total war, Zector approached the human admiral's holographic projection. "The warning in your chamber," he said. "Never drag humans into your wars. Did you know this would happen when you agreed to help us?" Zhang's expression was unreadable. "Ambassador, we didn't get dragged into this war. We chose to enter it the moment we realized what was really happening. The warning was never about protecting you from us." "Then what was it about?" Zhang's hologram began to fade as the transmission ended, but his final words carried clearly through the chamber. "It was about protecting the galaxy from what happens when humans decide they've been caged long enough." As the council chamber emptied and species representatives began the desperate task of mobilizing for galactic war, the ancient warning carved in stone seemed to pulse with new meaning. The words glowed brighter than they had in centuries, as if responding to the presence of forces that had been sleeping when they were first inscribed. "Never drag humans into your wars." But sometimes, the galaxy reflected grimly, humans dragged themselves into wars. And when that happened, everyone learned why the warning existed in the first place. The greatest conflict in galactic history was about to begin, and humanity was no longer hiding behind quarantine barriers. They were coming to the battlefield with weapons that could unmake reality itself, and they were bringing 2 centuries of pent-up aggression with them. The ancient enemy that had manipulated this conflict to study human capabilities was about to discover that some studies had unintended consequences. They had wanted to observe human military potential under combat conditions. They were about to get their wish in ways they couldn't possibly imagine.